Welcome to the Pulse Wave, brought to you by Metronome, where we build mission-critical tech to help harden our nation's land, sea, and sky, built for Earth, ready for orbit, and built for a country that's trying to figure out the difference between defense and dysfunction. And speaking of dysfunction, the government shut down. So if you're not funded or essential, you're essentially frozen at this point. Our customers' inboxes are piling up, and the same leaders who spent all those months preaching about speed to mission just pulled the plug on their own workforce. As far as I'm concerned, Congress should be locked in that building and not allowed to go home until they fight it out and they figure out a budget, not a continuing resolution even. It's pretty ridiculous. But not everybody's dodging hard conversations. I quote, "It's tiring to look out at combat formations and seeing fat troops. We're going to cut our hair, shave our beards, and adhere to standards. And no more dudes in dresses." That was our Secretary of War. And I guess somebody's got to say it. And is he singling people out? I guess so. But I assume he's doing it because we need people who can fight, people who can move, people who can lead, people who can win and not LARP their way through readiness. I don't think that's bigotry. It's biology, and it's called standards. Most people are afraid to say it because they're worried about memes. Meanwhile, recruiting has been tanking, morale has been catering, and the force is aging out while we bend over backwards trying not to offend TikTok. Maybe saying what's obvious isn't offensive. Perhaps it's leadership. So we're going to be talking about these great shutdowns, standards, and why the Department of War just did something that most other agencies won't do, which is tell the truth. So let's get to it. He's like a compliance clause in human form, sharp, uncomfortable, and totally necessary. Welcome back, John Ferry.
Oh man, they've been compared to a compliance clause before. That's ironic.
Waiting for that jacket.
It's in the Stitcher's shop. He codes like it's wartime and he talks like compliance is the enemy. He's tactical as ever. Welcome back to the show, Rob Murtha.
Yo, yo, yo. What's up?
Oh, not much. All right, so let's get to this. First, I want to start off with the shutdown. I pulled up some of this here, right? And so it was interesting, right? And I wanted to see what the facts were so I could have an opinion, I guess. And it was interesting because you got some people saying that, you're going to take the price of the exchange is going to go up for Americans. You're going to take their subsidies away. And, Jane's going to be paying $700 a month instead of $400 a month anymore. And then you hear some people saying that, well, we don't want all these billions of dollars going to illegal immigrants. Really, the fight is about not necessarily, there's a small percentage of this money that could and would go to illegal immigrants, but literally this fight is about immigrants and not citizens. So essentially, you can read through here, the administration essentially doesn't want asylum seekers, refugee, TPS holders, and DACA recipients who are currently able to enter the exchange and get the same subsidies as American citizens. And I won't get into what the subsidies are, but they're great. They are. It's an excellent exchange for people who need health care and who can't necessarily afford it. And then obviously another argument on the other side is like, well, these people deserve health care. Yes, they're not American citizens at all, but they're legally in the United States through asylum, through refugee status. So essentially, I guess, and then, I'm sorry, I'm going to go down a little bit more. The argument is if you take all of these people, and they never say specific about who these people are that are coming out of the exchange, which are the immigration status here. If you take it out, then the cost is going to go up, skyrocket for American citizens. And evidently, that's not necessarily the case either, because it would only go up percentage points. Evidently, I guess maybe these facts could be wrong too. But also, if you're a current American earning under 400% of the federal poverty line, you're not even allowed to have any of your costs touched at all. So I found it interesting that after looking at this, there's truths on both sides. And I'll throw it out there. Where I stand is, I think that I would need to learn a little bit more about how you become a lawful asylee, refugee, etc., and then I can form a better opinion. But right now, this sort of helps me when I'm looking across what we're sort of fighting about at this point and how we can move forward. And quite frankly, I don't know. We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars to go do asylum seekers and refugees. And like I said, I'm going to be honest. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I think I would need a little bit more. I'm curious. Anybody jump in here?
I'm jumping in. I appreciate your analysis there, because I haven't jumped in a lot on this either. I did see a pretty good breakdown yesterday, and to my understanding, what they're fighting about are provisions that are already in there, and one side's trying to get them put back in. I think, to your point, the barometer should be what we've defined as coming in through the legal process, and traditionally those folks have gotten access to healthcare. My main point on this is it shouldn't be this confusing, and the fact that healthcare is such a sticking point, honestly, is really discouraging. It should be something that is clear and easy to understand what's going on with the process. And Virgil, you wanting to dig in on okay, how are people legally here? And what does that mean? I totally understand that. But for me, it's okay, we've set that barometer. Maybe we don't understand what it is, but as long as they're here, those folks come in through the legal process, they should, get those benefits. But I also understand this is incredibly confusing, and I understand people don't want a drain on resources. I totally get all of that. My frustration around all of this is we're shutting the government down due to, fighting over healthcare, which is something that has been an issue in this country for a long time, just healthcare in general, and the system that we all have. And I actually looked into why do employers even pay healthcare? How did we get into the system where it was the employer's responsibility to provide healthcare for employees? And that goes back to World War I or World War II, and because they couldn't offer more wages, so they offered healthcare. But this whole debate it's crazy that the government is shutting down over it, but I understand both sides and the complications of it.
I think I would add to that. I think 2 points to bring up there. One, this is complex because it's not one policy issue, it's two, right? This is a healthcare, this is actually an immigration policy issue that's been abstracted through healthcare, right? Fundamentally, if you parse through in terms of partisan politics, TPS, DACA, and asylum seekers, the immigration reform and the immigration debate that has largely been bulldozed is whether or not there should be DACA recipients, right? And which party enabled DACA recipients, which party broadened the definition of asylum. And as someone who's married to the descendant of a asylum seeker from Cuba, I am sympathetic to the plight of asylum seekers, and whether or not the TPS program has, temporary protected status program, has been used properly and effectively, right? That's an immigration policy issue, and we're fighting over whether or not people who should or should not be here, immigration policy, should get public largesse or public support, right? Public money to essentially subsidize their existence in the country, right? So if those people were not here, or if the number of people were not here, if the immigration debate over those people to begin with was settled, which it's not, then there would not be an argument over whether or not those people should get health care. Because if both sides agreed that the right people were here, no one would be arguing whether or not we should give them health care, right? And so that's what causes this extended, protracted mire of debate. The bigger part, the bigger context there is, at the end of the day, your average American who does not live within a beltway bubble or does not do public sector work, one, has no idea what they're arguing about at the end of, fundamentally, they don't. Even the four people on this call who are probably 1,000% more plugged in than the average American, even we are not deep policy experts in these, nitnoid details, right? Like, so the average American has no freaking clue what they're arguing over. And I honestly don't think that 95% of Americans even care that the government shut down right now, right? In real terms, all they see is blue and red can't agree on something again, and they're making a brouhaha over something I don't understand, right? Like, this isn't changing anyone's minds. No one's getting extra elector points.
As usual.
No votes are going to change based on this. All it is more dysfunction. And really, at the end of the day, what is this actually? This is power politics. This is just one party wanting to assert some power in their current disadvantaged position, which happens every time power hands over. This is not a partisan issue. This is a bipartisan issue. The issues change. The actions stay the same. And at the end of the day, Americans really don't care. Most of them aren't affected, and like life goes on. So it's just dysfunction for the sake of dysfunction.
I'll jump in and have can you hear me?
Perfect.
I'll jump in and have just a fun kind of idealist and, contrary opinion to some of these things. I think the issue is more macro. I think we've seen a decline in trust of institutions, American expectations of life, all of these things for a really long time. I think we've just had such runway on any global competition for so many years that we could do this stuff, right? We could just be crazy and irresponsible and spend money on certain things, and it wouldn't really affect anything because we had the petrodollar, the whole reserve currency and everything. But simultaneously, we have real global competitors that are better than a lot of things that we used to be the best at. And they're also really trying to de-dollarize and also challenge us geopolitically by, being the international good guys, right? Building ports for people, even if it's predatory, et cetera. But they're doing a lot of this expansionism that America did forever. So as we continue to kind of be super just over the top with how we're spending things and not diligent about how we're governing our society, other competitors are multiplying the pressure on these systems that are already super dysfunctional and wasteful. And you couldn't justify it if you were a really competitive nation, right? I think that's also affecting some of this stuff. So I think it has a total impact, right? I was just looking recently, I'll add an example here. A friend of mine in high school, his son just got diagnosed with a serious medical condition, and they're raising a bunch of Kickstarter money because the bills aren't going to be covered by insurance. What has insurance diluted to? What has American hospitals diluted to? And then you always get gaslighted by these statements about America having the best medical and this and that. It's sure, but the spectrum's insane, right? If you're a billionaire, I'm sure you can get some crazy robotic surgery that nobody else can get anywhere else in the world. But if you're just trying to manage certain situations, it's probably awful. You're getting triaged and processed through these facilities. I mean, there's a spectrum there. I think the challenge is we've gotten so comfortable with manipulating information and mischaracterizing it to achieve an outcome in society that no one can have honest conversations about what's going to work for everyone at scale in a productive way. And you're seeing that now. I think people are just ripping the Band-Aid off and they're we can't do this anymore. We're being outpaced. We're losing. We need to win. And you see this kind of really painful collapse happening, which was inevitable,
Yeah. And I'm just coming out and saying that it is when it's not illegal immigrants. We're talking about non-U.S. citizens who do not have green cards. Those are all the people we're talking about right now. Yes, they're people, when you talk about some actual American citizens who perhaps already got the green card and then became citizens, perhaps those subsidies could be better if we're not piling on another tens of millions of the immigrants. Yeah, it's a tough issue. I appreciate you guys touching on it with me. Let's get a little bit more fun now. How's that?
Great.
Let's go.
I thought we were going to start talking about insurance. And insurance makes me absolutely insane.
Yeah, I know this guy.
Please take your seats. Frankly, it's tiring to look out at combat formations, or really any formation, and see fat troops. Likewise, it's completely unacceptable to see fat fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon and leading commands around the country and the world. It's a bad look. It is bad, and it's not who we are. So whether you're an airborne ranger or a chairborne ranger, a brand new private or a 4-star general, you need to meet the height and weight standards that pass your PT test.
So I didn't serve. I'm curious from the guys who have a little more skin in the game here. And then I'll give you my opinion.
I have no skin in the game, but he also said beardos. I've never heard that term before, beardos. And I was like, oh my God. So what's really interesting is this morning I got an email from, I don't know what this is from, but they basically said Navy hits historic recruiting numbers because of more ads and tattoo approvals. So like lessening the requirement, the standard on tattoos. So I just find it interesting that they're talking about getting back to the standards. But one of the things that, because again, I didn't serve, but I heard like in the Navy, you had to have like inches between tattoos, like you couldn't be sleeved and all this stuff. And so they're citing one of the main factors to drive recruitment was lessening the tattoo standards. So I just thought that was an interesting counterpoint when they're talking about increasing standards, that one of the highest drivers for recruitment was lessening the tattoo standard. I just thought that was interesting. I got that this morning.
You know who's got a lot of tats?
The SecDef.
Pete.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll take a stab at this. I did serve, and from my perspective, so my background, infantry, airborne, special forces officer, right? So like multiple chains of attrition and ascension. So like it's pretty much an iron law, regardless of what organization you're talking about. I'm not just talking about the military, but standards and evaluation and attrition are an important function for establishing effective workforces, period. Right? We all do this in the professional realm by like, hey, the position requirements for this job are 5 years experience, a bachelor's degree, and a top secret clearance, right? Like we all do this. There's a filtering function for everybody. In the military, it's pretty unique because there is a balance between your cognitive skills that you need to be able to do your job. And we have tests for that everyone has to take when they come into the military. And then we have the actual like hard things we do of, some people break stuff, some people pick up heavy stuff. I did a lot of picking up heavy stuff and breaking stuff, right? And so, if you went from the first threshold I crossed, which is like become an infantryman, there were people who didn't make it. And then getting to airborne school, there was a lot of people who didn't make it. And then going to special forces, a lot of people did not make it, right? And so there's levels, right? There's a hierarchy in the military. That's why we think that fighter pilots are amazing and Green Berets and Navy SEALs and Marine Corps Raiders are amazing, because the number of people who couldn't do it is much, much, much larger than the people who could. So if you go all the way down to the base entry, the entrance criteria for the military, I think it's fair to say, and we can quibble over whether or not cyber operators need to maintain physical fitness standards because all they're doing is sitting in a knock and like shooting cyber bullets all day. Like, oh, they don't need to be fit. I would actually argue with that. But for the vast majority of roles in the military, having a modicum standard of physical fitness where you are not obese is a job requirement, right? It's just like in the professional world. If you want to wear a pressed white collar, generally you have to have a bachelor's degree, and everyone just accepts that, right? And that's why everyone has to go to college, because even if you get an underwater basket weaving degree, the entry requirements for a white collar job are a freaking degree, right? So like, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that like you have to maintain height and weight. And frankly, everybody who served in the GWAT and actually did the thing, that was still the norm. So the fact that we relax those standards, I actually think we relax those standards because we need to broaden the recruiting base. Why do we need to broaden the recruiting base? Because people weren't signing up anymore. And this is a death spiral issue where, and you see the inverse, the converse of that now, right? Whether you believe the facts or not, supposedly recruiting has gone through the roof. There's probably reasons for that, but one of them is people want to be part of a workforce that they want to be part of, right? There's a reason why Goldman Sachs gets a lot of applicants every year, because there is a standard that they maintain, and there is a status that they impart on their, participants, the people who get employed there. So like, if the fighting force is an elite force, is a high standard force, that attracts more people of that ilk. I'm not going to let my kids join a fighting force full of fat bodies that wear slovenly uniforms and look like a clown show. Like, that's not where I'm going to send my kids. But if we maintain standards, you increase the pool of people who are potentially interested in joining that fighting force, and that maintains a positive cycle. If you go in the other direction, where you lower the standards, you lower the esteem and the excellence that is perceived of that workforce, you're going to get lower and lower and lower quality recruits. And you're going to have to keep lowering the standard to maintain a wide enough recruiting base to fill those ranks. And that's what we've done over the past, since we kind of pulled out of the wars, that's kind of what we've precipitously done. And I think rebaselining to, no, we are an excellent force, regardless of your politics. I think, to Rob's point, like, we still need to be able to fight wars. So we still need an excellent fighting force. That's like an American ethos. So we need to take the human capital approach that is going to achieve that. And I think looking at the last 20 years of declining recruiting rates, declining force posture, has shown us that, like, indexing in the other direction is probably worth an experiment.
But what about the beards?
Let me jump in about that same topic, because I think I directly have touch points with like both the tattoo thing and the height, weight, and tape thing, which are really interesting. Let me start off by saying, I think, for going back to my original point around like the specific environment allowed us to just behave a certain way and not kind of index on certain things. So for counterinsurgency, all the conflicts over there in CENTCOM, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, we expanded special operations and all the different special forces groups tremendously, right? And for all the other services branches. And we really put a lot on their shoulders because it was a very kind of surgical, political, geopolitical mission. And what's interesting, right? We kind of let the support, obviously there were standards, and we had incredible like mechanized infantry and conventional forces that supported those operations and did a lot during those conflicts. But these future wars that we're preparing for, we can't rely on, SOCOM to carry the weight there. Like, we have to be able to rely on our conventional forces again, and they have to be executing at a very, very high level. And so we need your standard operator, your standard service member, who, whether you're an infantryman or support, you need to be able to pick up a rifle World War II style and contribute to the fight. If, because not everything is this like weird kind of drone robot war that everyone's kind of like all the tech bros are like communicating. We've seen it in Ukraine, right? Like EW kind of totally cancels that out. And it goes back to coax cable and just like old school fighting with like basic weapon systems on like the conscript's body, right? And you just have to be more cunning and more committed than the other to win or hold the line. And it's like, it's foundational. And so, and what's interesting too, right? So my experience is really funny. So I joined the military. I told you, my story, Virgil, and for other folks on here, grew up in the Hamptons, didn't intend on serving, kind of got inspired by a professor and was like, you know what? I grew up during 9/11. I've always wanted to serve. I'm going to jump in there. It's kind of like a chapter in my book. I wanted to deploy. It was kind of what I expected in the military. I thought it was like Forrest Gump, where you like cleaned rifles. I didn't know there was like entire career elements to it. So I ended up deploying to Afghanistan twice. The first time was, I had a long AIT. I enlisted with a degree. I was a intelligence guy and went through all this tactical battalion level intelligence stuff. Ended up deploying, had a blast, loved it. Got pinned sergeant in 18 months, which was awesome. And then I was doing a lot of stuff stateside. We were doing some operational stateside, and one of the NCOs that was supposed to deploy actually was too big. They busted tape. That means you were like too fat to deploy. And my company commander was like, Mirtha, can you like roll out there and extend your contract and take over for Sergeant so-and-so? And I was like, absolutely. Like, love the unit, love my mission. It was really cool. So I went out there and extended my contract to deploy. totally kicked butt, right? It was a different environment from 2012 to 2014. But while I was out there, Sergeant Major of the Army Chandler imposed this like weird tattoo policy. It was the strangest thing ever, where you couldn't go green to go, like you couldn't go NCO to officer if you had a sleeve tattoo, if you could see tattoos outside in like down your PT uniform. And I was like, this is insane. This is like the creepy bureaucracy I've always feared. The company commander forward actually had to bring me down to the TOC and take pictures of all my tattoos and look for like gang tattoos and stuff. It was crazy. It was like this whole thing in 2014. I got back to the States, and I remember like as I was out processing from the military, because I just decided to ETS at that point. I was at like a gas station, and there was like a Ranger tabbed first cab dude who had like tattoos up his neck and like, you know, locked in haircut and stuff. And I was like, dude, honestly, you know, I agree. Like there are standards, but we're in like a very primitive profession where you go out there, you eat garbage, you work 16 hours a day, you get no days off. Like, and that's just coin, right? That's not even major theater war when you're like day in and day out, like out in the frontier, just trying to survive and live off the land and shit with your crew. Like you need savages to like best an opponent in this environment, and UASs and this whole FPV thing, that's going to augment the typical standard like human on human war that's going to occur in any of these environments, whether it's in PACOM, UCOM, et cetera. And you need to condition people to be ready for that type of environment. I think we've had like the luxury of being in a counterinsurgency situation where you had Bagram, which was isolated from chaos, and you had other places that were isolated from chaos. But you talk to anyone out at, you know, the straight up like cops and stuff, the combat outposts, and it's like, shit's real. And it's going to get way like what we've seen in Ukraine. You need people that are dialed in mentally and physically to survive that type of experience and not become a risk for somebody else. And that's not even accounting for like, I looked at World War II and Vietnam kind of statistics. 60% of the force will end up being draftees, whether people want to like that or not, right? It's going to be like a crazy amount of people that need to be inspired by the active troops that are dialed in and locked in and regimented and are meeting high standards at the conventional service member level. So those are all really interesting kind of data points. My last data point I'm going to say is like, if you do impose these health standards, at least, you're also going to pay down the risk of like VA issues that the entire country is paying for after these service members get out, where they have a lot of issues and they could have just like adopted a more physically fit kind of healthy mindset and mentality that goes well beyond their service, right? This is about their lives and how they take care of their bodies and how they're ready to perform outside of the military for other companies, for other institutions. It's like a really, really big deal. And I think it's a big win for the American population.
Let me just add one more thing to that real quick. So, honestly, the physical standards, all that stuff, it makes total sense. Like, but if you look at, like, my first job, I was in a hotel. I had to be clean shaven. I had to wear a suit and tie. If I wanted to work there, that's what I had to do, right? And it's like, I think sometimes we forget, like you said, Rob, like what we're asking these people to do is the extreme of the extreme in regards to their day-to-day, operating activities. But yeah, I mean, if you look across just where you want to work, places have dress codes, places have standards. Mm-hmm. So I draw parallels to that too. But yeah, it's an interesting topic for sure.
Yeah, I like how you put it, John. When you're enforcing these standards and you see it and it's something that you admire and you want to be a part of, you don't necessarily slim down the recruiting base. You're actually really widening it, and you're attracting people that want to be part of that. Like I said, I didn't serve, but if you're asking me who I want to be protecting me, actually, I'll put it this way. I'll use the secretary's words. If you took a fat person and asked them, who do you want to protect you? That fat guy over there that's in uniform, or the svelte, in shape one that can rip your head off? I don't know. I have a feeling
I want a jacked up, tattooed, bearded dude.
Yeah. Come on now. I'll tell you, I had an issue with the beard. When I was watching it this morning, I'm like, come on, Pete. Jeez, this looks good. Come on.
Yeah. So supposedly,
guys, I appreciate this. Was fun. Oh, go ahead.
Supposedly, the counter to the beard, if you go back to Army doctrine, is for the form, fit, and function of the gas mask. Actually, that's right. That's what they indoctrinated us with in basic training. In reality, is that the case? No, it's probably not. It's about uniformity. at the end of the day, it's about uniformity. When you look out at that formation, you want to look at a well-formed, tight, clean group. And that's where the tattoo policies came from, right? With the tattoos that were traditionally more strict on officers were because officers are supposed to be held at a higher standard than the enlisted, right? They are the professional class, the people who in the Revolutionary and Civil War could read when the enlisted men couldn't, right? So to double tap on that, haircut standards, 100% hold them, right? And if you need to relax them for people because they're special, like Green Berets who got relaxed grooming standards, I'm good with that. But there should be a status associated with it. If you need to grow a beard to fit in, I'm good with that. There's exceptions to policy. The tattoos, look, like culture has shifted. Tattoos are more normal, right? And having tattoos are not a prohibitor of combat effectiveness. So if we make our policies around those things which are forwarding combat effectiveness and focus on that as the outcome, then I think everything we do will make a lot more sense.
So the Yankees just relaxed their hair standards and their beard standards after 100 years. I wonder how worse the Yankees are going to end up getting. And on that note, thanks for joining again. Go Canes, kick the shit out of the Seminoles. Keep pulsing.